Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to you, wherever you might be in the world. Here in Western Australia, which is where I live, it is actually 1:11 p.m., 11 past 1. Interesting numbers there. Anyway, obviously, before I get into the content, today we're going to be talking about Celestite. That's right up there. Celestite being one of my most favourite crystals, true story. Um, I just want to say thank you to everybody who actually joins the channel, subscribes, that kind of thing, and invite you all to actually leave your comments and thoughts, beliefs, and opinions, whether they are the same as mine or not, especially when it comes to the content and the way that we use crystals. I think the more information we share, the more each of us grow. Now, when it comes to the actual content, such as mineralogy and geology and that kind of thing, I am not a geologist, so it's very tentative information I provide there, and I welcome the contributions of people that have got more expertise than what I have. Now, the other thing that I want to make mention of is I do tend to have a bit of a waffle. I go down the rabbit warren, and this is one of the reasons why I put timestamps and markers in the description, is because I recognize if you're anything like me, generally when we click on a button or a video and we want to watch something, we're watching for a specific reason. There's information that we want, and we don't want to have to sit through an hour-long video to get that little tidbit that we're after. So you will find, if there is specific information that you want, that those timestamps are there. You can pause, stop the video, obviously come back whenever you feel like it, and you can click to where it is that you want to go. So I just try and make life a little bit easier for everybody. And so without further ado, let's get into talking about Celestite. So when we talk about Celestite, I guess the first thing that we want to know with any crystal is actually what does it look like and what can we expect. Once we talk about the metaphysical properties as we go through the video, you might decide that this is absolutely a crystal that you would like to have in your crystal toolbox. But how do you know that you're actually buying the real thing, or how do you know if you're being scammed? So let's talk about what Celestite actually looks like. Now, I'm used to looking at Celestite in this way. Many years ago, I was introduced to it, probably about 15 years ago. So when I say it's absolutely one of my favourite pieces, this is because I use it a lot, and I've got a number of pieces and they have got varying shades of blue, and we'll look at that in a little while as well. And I also have them in different shapes as far as how they sit in your hand, and if they sit in your hand, or if they're jewelry items, all of that kind of thing. But what I would like you to look at with this particular image here is the fact that we are looking at a cluster of crystals, pretty much like amethyst. So when I was introduced to Celestite, it was actually from an importer, somebody that used to bring them in from wherever it was that he imported from, but they were actually really big geodes, and I'll show you a couple of images of geodes in a moment. And because they really hadn't been treated particularly by humans, beyond perhaps a bit of a smack with a hammer, sounds terrible, to break it so that it opens up and you can actually have a look on the inside, the externals of these Celestite geodes were pretty much, you can see the bottom of this image here, it's got this white and greyish type colouring to it. I suppose the way I refer to that, because I keep things very simple, I call that sort of like the crusty bit. That's the outside bit. The Celestite is the points that's actually inside, and because the outside part of the geode tends to go white, with the crystals, like amethyst. Okay, if you're used to looking at an amethyst geode, everybody knows that it's purple on the inside, it's got a bit of white around the edges, and then you've got the external rock. Well, Celestite is pretty well the same. And as with amethyst, you're going to get different depths of blue. Amethyst can be very vibrant, it can be very deep purple. Well, the Celestite will never be actually a dark blue, but it has more depth depending on the Celestite. This one here, you're looking at very, very pale, light blue coloured points, I guess, crystals within the geode. And anyway, I'll move on from that. I won't keep waffling about this right now. I'll talk more about that in a moment. For now, though, let's have a look at which of the Zodiac that might benefit best from Celestite. So, just to reiterate, I've discussed this in other videos. When we talk about zodiac connections to crystals, this doesn't mean that people from other star signs or whatever can't use the crystal. Anybody can use it, particularly if they feel drawn to it. Because if you manage to get into a shop and physically hold crystals, you'll know if you feel a pull towards it, or you feel energy, or any of the other sensations that you get when holding a crystal. You will know if it's meant for you and if you're meant to buy it that day. But if you say shopping online, you won't necessarily know. And if you take this kind of stuff on board, that you have to be a Taurus, a Libra, or a Gemini to be able to use Celestite effectively, you'll actually be doing yourself a disservice, because anybody can use Celestite. And I just want to make the point here, it is actually recommended for these 3 star signs, the Gemini, the Libra, and the Taurus, as I mentioned. Point of interest here is that Libra and Gemini are obviously both air signs, whereas Taurus is an earth sign. So I find it interesting that it's recommended for these 3 people. I would say, and you'll understand this as we shift into looking at the metaphysical properties of Celestite, that it is the type of crystal that has the capacity for you to become ungrounded. So I just find it really interesting, because if a person's an air sign, they have tendencies to overthink and become analytical, generally speaking. And I would say, look, Celestite's not just about. I'm just thinking how to broach into this. We are going to talk about it. I might leave you thinking about where I'm going with this instead of me actually going there right now, just to keep things in a little bit of order. Yeah, I just find it an interesting link that it's recommended for Libra and Gemini, shall we say. So, as an overview, just a summary of the metaphysical attributes of Celestite, you can see here that they include divine communication and enhancing your spiritual growth and development, as well as your psychic gifts. So, it's also associated with things such as astral travel, spirit communication, connecting with your spiritual guides, all of this kind of thing. Now, I'm going to go into that in more detail a little further along with the slides, but I think when you look at it like this, or put this into perspective, it's kind of a top-heavy crystal, working on the, if you're talking about psychic gifts to start with, you're talking about the brow chakra. And when you're talking about communication, you're talking about the throat chakra. So we're talking about upper body chakra work, where the energy of Celestite tends to be directed. And I forgot to mention on that last slide, that's why I sort of struggle a little bit with this idea that Celestite works really, really well for the air signs, because there is that top-heavy aspect, if you like. And maybe it's about the fact that it's a very soothing and peaceful type crystal. But let's talk about the mineral information now, as best I can within my own limitations. And this was a learning curve for me. I've got to say, we never stop learning. And when I was doing my research on the mineral content here, I actually learned some new things, which is, before I talk about the mineral information, you will see these little images that I've got here. I've got the blue one, which of course is the Celestite, but then I've got these graphics, and I included those because I thought, oh yes, when I went and checked out this mineral information, it actually makes specific reference to the shape of the points. Now, for your information, if you're new to crystals, you might not understand what I mean by points. And what I do mean is the individual pointy part that is in the cluster. So if you've got a geode, it is made of a whole gathering, just about a family party of crystals joining together. Now, if we look at things, crystals such as amethyst, we will see it comes to a direct point. There's no flattening, shall we say, at the tip of the crystal point. Now, this might be a bit confusing, so just hang in there with me. Hopefully, I'm drawing a picture with my words as well as with these graphics to explain to you that what was new to me is the crystal point, the tip of it. I hadn't realised, and this is quite true. When I look at my own Celestite, I can actually see that the point of the point, if that makes sense, is not pointed, it's flat. like what we see in these graphics. So that's a little bit of newness for me. Now, the other thing that I wasn't aware of until I did my research was the fact that Celestite comes in a number of different colours. It's not just blue, but blue, I must admit, is the only one that I've seen. Okay, so first things, let's talk about the mineral stuff here, the geo type stuff, which is that the family it comes from is called a barite. Now, I just want to draw to your attention here too, because if you start Googling and you're trying to find a crystal or some celestite and you type in the word barite, it's got two spellings, because apparently, I may have this back to front now, I've forgotten. Apparently it used to be spelled, I think, with the Y or maybe with the I, as in barite, but then it has changed over the years. And when I was doing my research, I saw actually geologists and other people who are rock hounds or whatever, that were actually having a discussion that for them it became confusing because people use the different spelling. Now, the other thing is that Celestite, as a mineral name, it's also got two names. So just remember this stuff for when you start doing your research and trying to find your crystals, or trying to find a good supplier, because obviously that's not so easy anymore. Celestite was originally called Celestine or Celestine, depending on your pronunciation. And over time, the name of the Celestite has evolved to what we now call Celestite. So Celestite is still a legitimate name for the crystal. And I got the background on why it's called Celestite and why it was called Celestine. And this was because one of the, was it a geo? Somebody somewhere decided that with the shades and the hues of the blue, that it actually reminded them of angels, which is really interesting because when we talk about the metaphysical properties, it is actually associated with angels. So anyway, it got the name Celestite or Celestine. The other part that's worth knowing, I think, as far as sharing information goes, is that when we look at the hardness of Celestite, it's actually a 3 to a 3.5, which means that it's not particularly hard. Even though those crystals look like they're fairly strong, they're not. And to put this into perspective, so you've got a little bit of a story here. I'm one of these people that I'm a believer that if a crystal falls apart or breaks apart, that is because a part of that crystal needs to be gifted onwards to somebody else. Now, what happened was many years ago, because I've got so much Celestite, because I'm almost embarrassed to say this, as I said, it's one of my favourites. I do tend to be a bit of a gatherer of it, bit of a glutton for crystals historically. Have to use some self-control there. But anyway, what happened was I had my specials, because I've got eggs and spheres and clusters and that kind of stuff. They're not massive, I must say. They're not great big geodes or anything like that. But I had managed to pick up a really big chunk. And when I say really big, I need to clarify, I guess, don't I? It was big because it was part of a slice of a big geode, and it had a really interesting mix of points and all of that kind of stuff within it. And so let's say it was probably about the size of a ruler, but it was not thick like a ruler because, of course, it's the outer shell. Anyway, I'm waffling too much. Bottom line is I met a lady who was a single mum who money was a problem for, and I had managed to get this slice at a very good price from somebody in Turkey. So anyway, what happened was I really wanted, I guess, to give her a bit, but my Celestite is working crystals, you may as well say. I'll explain that to you in a little while. So I was reluctant to part with any of the other pieces of crystal, but I had this big slice, and I didn't want to give all of it away because it was particularly beautiful. Some of those points were really stunning, and I realised I was being a bit selfish. But bottom line is I knew she wanted some, so I thought, suck it up, girlfriend, give it a shot. And so I put it out to the universe, if I was meant to give this girl a piece of my Celestite, that it would break when I was holding it. So I did. I just put it out there to the universe, and I had the Celestite, one part in each hand, and then I just applied a little bit of pressure. And with that, a portion of the Celestite broke away, and I ended up giving her Actually, as it happens, the stunning crystals, there was sort of like one part was bigger, and then there was a small part that had some really big points on it, which was absolutely beautiful. But either way, I gave that to her. Do I regret it? No, yes and no. I'll be honest, I actually really like it, but I recognize when I'm being selfish, and it went to the right person. You put it out to the universe, it goes to the right person. So when it comes to buying tips for Celestite, bear with me. I've kind of written some notes so that I don't forget, but I will. We know what I'm like by now. I hope we do. If you're a returning visitor, you know I'm going to go off down the tangent because I just don't seem to have any self-control. Anyway, okay. So when it comes to things like buying them and the cost, right, what they call the large, clean, faceted Celestites, they've become very rare. Now, to put this into perspective, we're looking at the image on the top left of the page here. You can see that beautiful large point there. It's not really a point because, of course, it's got a line across it. They are becoming rare to be in that quality. So they probably are going to cost a bit more unless you've got a really good supplier who's been able to pick them up at really good prices. When I talk about an egg, you see, the thing with anything that is a geode is once you start cutting into it and trying to shape it, you get misshapen product, shall we say, a lot of the time. And I have a bit of a laugh because I've seen people that go like, but that sphere is broken, or with this image that I've got at the top left, second from the left up the top, that's actually, I can tell when looking at it, that is a celestite egg. And of course, it's got an unusual shape because you're carving out the base of a geode or the top of a geode, and you're not going to get a perfect shape. I wanted to actually have that particular egg there, though, to show you that there actually is a difference in the shades of blue, which you should be starting to pick up on by now. So you're looking at some really, those two images on the left, I believe that the guy that named Celestite did so because he must have had a piece that had those colorings. But I've got pieces that are this beautiful, very pale light blue as well. And then when you go over to the right hand side, you actually see that cluster there that looks a bit on the grey side, looks a bit mucky and dirty. But at the same time, this is where photographs don't do crystals justice, okay? And this is where I say that it's very, very difficult to actually convey through a photograph the actual feel and the visual impact and effect of a crystal. So I would imagine that that particular crystal is not actually this dirty grey colour that we're looking at here, or it looks dirty grey to me, certainly when you compare it to the other photographs. I would imagine that's probably a pale type blue. And potentially, if you were able to get up closer into it, it would be that lighter blue that you see in the photograph underneath it. Now, if you look at Celestite and do your research on it, it is actually supposed to be transparent. So I've put in these other images because they actually take me by surprise. And by that, I mean the ones that are in the rough and the ones in the bowl. Okay, so both of those I consider to be particularly low grade, and I don't think that I would actually even buy either of those. But I included them because, well, in the first instance, I wanted people to be able to see what is being sold as Celestite, and what they can expect. You probably will have to pay a lot more for this really beautiful blue stuff. But if they're selling, this is what I come down to, I think, when they sell really low-grade product, that's fine, but make sure it's got a low-grade price attached to it, because otherwise it's just a rip-off and a scam. Now, I make mention of this because when we look at the crystals that are in the bowl, those ones that are shaped, and I think they're called palm stones. I don't know if they're tumbled stones. Actually, I wrote down the dimensions of this because it made me gasp. Right, those, I just checked. I had to put you on pause for a moment. Okay, those tumbles or palm stones, they're supposed to be 3 centimetres long each, and they are being sold on a website here in Australia, embarrassingly from where I sit, for $20 Australian for each of those stones, which as you can see, they're very cloudy, they're opaque, they're not translucent or transparent at all. And in fact, they're really, they've got that real grey colour to it. They're really, really low quality. So hopefully I've given you a couple of pointers there. If you've got some ideas, do let me know. The only other thing that I want to mention on this video, on this particular slide, before I move on to the next one, is that I find it interesting, and I wish that my old supplier was still alive, because then I would ask him, when we look at this geode that's at the top and it's got the grey on the outside, I'm actually wondering if that's a coating that is placed at source. You know, the suppliers and retailers, once they've dug them out the ground, you know, if the geodes are fragile, I'm wondering if they actually put a grey coating over it to protect the actual geode for travel, because none of the Celestite geodes that I saw had that grey covering to them. So if you know the answer to that, please feel free to let us know. So Celestite is one of the most powerful crystals actually out of all the ones that I've come across, in as far as it does actually expand and enhance a person's individual power. And it does this when we talk about the spiritual attributes of this crystal. It is all about communication, but it's about divine communication. So its attributes include being able to meditate and go into that no mind state, which that is where you push your ego aside so that you allow yourself to be filled with divine presence, to be able to communicate at this much higher level. So it raises the personal vibration very, very high. Of course, you've got to do some of this stuff gradually. Practice makes perfect, I guess, would be something that I would put out there. But when we start working at this vibration and maximizing the vibration of our own aura, then of course we start to be able to access our psychic gifts, which is obviously all the clairs, the capacity to be able to do telepathy. Astral traveling is up there as one of the attributes of being enhanced through the use of Celestite. But we're then actually coming to this point where communication, right? It's all about the communication. And because the vibration is high, it's communicating at a very high level. So it's attributed also to help a person to connect and unite the lower self and higher self aspects, and able to get into that higher self state, and to be able to not just communicate with the higher beings and get into the higher realms, but also to be able to bring that knowledge down for day-to-day life. And that can be when you're doing your energy work, if you're a metaphysical healer or a psychic or a medium or whatever, who wants to be able to communicate with spirit to convey messages to those on the earth plane, then Celestite is a really good crystal to have for that. So basically, this is why I've put on there that not only does it enhance your spiritual growth and development, but it fosters, builds and strengthens the connections that we have with those higher beings. And that can be the guides, spirit guides, it can be the angels, it can be the people that have passed over, our loved ones, you know, to strengthen that capacity to communicate with them. It's also said to enhance telepathy. I haven't actually used, I'll be straight up, I haven't actually consciously used Celestite for the purposes of telepathy. But when I say that all of my Celestite is working crystals, this is because I hold Celestite, or I, at least before I do a metaphysical service, be it a reading, psychic or mediumship type reading, I will actually sit with Celestite and hold it to as part of my ritual, if you like, to get into that no mind space to be able to do a service for somebody. So just a few tips there. So when it comes to the physical attributes, of course, I remain very much the case of do not stop seeing your doctor, but feel free to use your crystals as part of your treatment and health programs. But if you've got concerns about your health, do go and see a doctor. But it is attributed to have benefits for people as far as their eyesight is concerned, to improve their vision. If people are struggling with hearing problems, it's supposed to assist with that, you know, because at the end of the day, communication is a factor of Celestite. Did I mention it's supposed to be good for manifestation? Anyway, whatever. Moving on from that, we're talking about physical. Okay, it is said to enhance a person's speech and their personal expression, which is great. Um, if people have got issues with the brain in as far as function, it's said to support that balance between right and left brain. And I would say probably even frontal lobe and God, what do you call it? The brain stem, where the brain stem is the source of reaction, to balance out people's emotional reactivity, that impulse, to regulate that by drawing upon the qualities of the frontal lobe. So there is that brain balance as well. And it's said to support thyroid function. I would imagine that there's actually other benefits, perhaps to do with the pineal gland and things like that. But I will put that out to you guys to see what your thoughts are. But I feel definitely, based on the other healing attributes, that the pineal gland would be part of that. Even the pituitary, actually. So when it comes to the emotional and psychological attributes, there are a multitude of benefits that come from Celestite, apparently. I've got to be, obviously, what is that word? Not too emotionally attached to what I believe, and just give you the facts as I know and understand them to be, and as has been put to me. So the bottom line is, when it comes to the benefits and the attributes, it's said to clear any blocked energy, particularly if it relates to emotional trauma. And I find this very important. Okay, people who have become stuck and feeling sorry for themselves can expect to be inspired to a more positive mindset and framework when they start working with and wearing Celestite. So it's recommended to help people in their creative pursuits, and creativity actually is quite often transmuting or transforming thoughts of the negative into the positive. That is a form of creativity as well. But either way, it's recommended for people such as artists, as part of their personal and creative expression. And because it's such a soft, gentle energy with Celestite, it's recommended for the more gentle arts as well, such as artists working with watercolor, or people who are musicians trying to find music, or if they're in some kind of theatrical pursuits, to find the right music, or even to compose the right music for their desired outcome, shall we say. It is also attributed to clear the mind of any of this negative mind chatter and the doubts, those irrational, self-sabotaging thoughts that people get stuck in. It's said to enhance verbal and written expression, and to support the personal development and achievement of goals. And frankly, I would say that's quite probably because when we are emotionally calm and balanced, we're better able to act towards those goals. So it also apparently supports peaceful and loving expression of feelings, to raise personal awareness, not just of yourself, but how you interact with others in the environment. And that self-awareness can be even seeing the role that you might play in conflict. And sometimes with the best of intentions, conflict occurs because we are not responsible for how other people take our words. But when we can see how other people have reacted to something we may have said or done, we might know what our intentions were. We could have been pure of intent, but we can see how that triggered another person. So we're then able to adjust what we say and how we say it. I would say, being realistic here, I can say that, but the reality is too that quite often, if we have to change ourselves too much, so this is a little bit of awareness, when we have to deny aspects of ourselves to accommodate other people's needs, we start to feel inauthentic. We start to feel that we're not being true to ourselves anymore. And the other thing is too, because we live in a real world with real people with real problems, it's not all out there with the fairies, that sometimes we can actually make those adjustments, and then we find that it doesn't matter what we do, it's still not actually received with the purity of intention of which we may have said or done in the first place. And then that requires obviously reassessing relationships, but at least there is an awareness there. We can all cope with what we know, we can make those adjustments, and sometimes I guess it becomes about informed decision making. But either way, the other thing to do with manifestation is that when we are not having our decision and judgment clouded by irrational and illogical fears, which end up lead to sabotage and that kind of stuff, we can actually make those healthy decisions and stick on the path of achieving that goal. So that's probably how Celestite supports the manifestation process. Not to mention, or not to forget, that when we're talking about manifesting, and if we've got access to the higher realms, such as the angels and guides, we can tap into their wisdom and ask to be directed along the path, or to be given the information that we need to be able to stay on the path and not allow ourselves to be diverted, and stick to the divine plan. Just thoughts, just putting it out there to you. So when we talk about the chakra associations, if I can speak, associations with Celestite, well, of course, we're talking about communication attributes, and that is always going to be associated with the throat chakra. But when we're talking about the psychic gifts, generally speaking, people immediately go to the brow and the crown, and this is actually what Celestite is associated with. There is another chakra higher than the crown, though. I think that's called, oh my gosh, gee, I'm having a blank. Definitely angels, celestial chakra. So I would say it's associated with that one as well. But what more can I say about this? Quite simply, that people may not be aware that when we talk about the throat chakra, we're talking about what some people call the seat of the soul, because the throat chakra is that communication center. So the heart chakra is very important, of course, to be able to communicate in loving ways. And then, this whole package of the brow chakra being able to see and understand the visions. And it's not just, when we talk about the brow, we're not just talking about visions, we're talking about the whole range of senses, which is to be able to hear, clairaudience, to be able to smell. For some people, communication is not via a vision, it's via a smell, which could be somebody used to bake cookies or whatever. Most people have heard of this. But when we talk about the throat chakra, that's considered to be like a channel. I guess in some ways we might say that's the aerial. Maybe not. This is one of those situations where to actually translate into words is very difficult when we're talking about divine and universal energy. Sorry, I just need a cough and I'll process this while I'm coughing. I think, if we were to say telepathic communication, that's not enough, because when we communicate telepathically, not only are we channeling the information, but we're actually feeling it in our heart and in our throat chakra. So you can actually channel telepathically without seeing any form of vision or hearing anything at all, but you actually, because you're channeling this information, that's what leads to that inner knowing, that clear cognizance. And I'm sorry if there's people out there that do the I know. Okay, well, you might know, but if it doesn't come with those energy sensations, this is the part of learning discernment as to do you think you know, or are you actually receiving guided information where you know certain things? Like that, this might actually be content for another video where we talk about understanding the clairs and what it feels like. So put it this way, and this is not the happy news, this is not the happy stuff. I recall my sister coming to me many, many years ago, saying to me that her father-in-law had just been diagnosed with cancer. Now, I didn't know the guy's scenario or anything like that, but automatically straight away I knew this guy was not going to make it. Okay, I just knew. And the reason I knew was not because it was in my head, it was because I felt it. And of course, I couldn't say that, because when somebody's diagnosed, you want to try and retain hope for as long as you can. So I just kept that to myself. But eventually, of course, he did pass away, and it was not a long time from his diagnosis. And after his diagnosis, I remember saying to my sister, I'm sorry about that. I said, but I always had the feeling, as you do, that he was not going to be here for a long time after his diagnosis. Now, she's reasonably switched on herself, and she was like, yes, I know. She said, me too, as you do. She said, but I didn't want to believe that. I wanted him to live for longer. I was like, yeah, I know that. as you do. Oh, okay. So the second, I know that. That's my head speaking. I knew logically and rationally as a human being that that's what my sister was hoping for. I didn't need to be a psychic to actually pull that information through. But the first, I know he's not going to survive, that was based on channeled information. But either way, so talking about the chakras, this is the kind of skill base, I guess, that you can develop when you work with Celestite, I suppose, is really getting the full function of the throat, the heart, the brow, and the crown chakras. So throughout the course of this video, I've kind of spoken of a few ways that you can actually use Celestite. Now, clearly the first thing is, because we all love jewellery, don't we? I think whether we're male, female or whatever, we can have the jewellery points, and the leather. That's quite common, to make the little crystal pendulums out of it. But some of us like to have earrings or pendants or whatever. But the other thing is, of course, if you've got a really nice cluster, or even if you've just got an egg or a sphere or whatever, they make great ornaments, because when they're in the environment, even if they're ornamental, they still actually radiate out these healing properties, which is calmness and peace and, just wonderfully warming, soft, gentle energy, which is great for a house that's got a lot of turbulence in it, shall we say. If there's a lot of feelings, raised feelings and emotions, shall we say, the house and the environment is going to benefit from it. And if you live in the kind or work in the kind of workplace where there's a lot of tense emotions as well, it might actually be beneficial, if you're allowed to have some Celestite in your workspace. But alternatively, if not, you could put some onto your computer. If you're like me, I have crystals around my computer as well, or you could wear it on your person, in your bra, whatever. Other ways that you can use it is actually, as I mentioned, when you're doing your metaphysical activities or services. So when I do my readings, I'll actually hold it and then I put it down. When I'm actually handling cards or whatever else, I'll put it down on the table, because the energy is still going on. I've activated it. But I think a point, because we're all different, this will be something that you could feed back on or take into account if you actually go and buy some Celestite. Is, I actually thought about this, and I don't think that I would be able to wear Celestite all the time, or on my person, because I feel that if I did, I would actually probably be flicking out there, going into la la land, and just one of these rogue people that walks around the shops, giving messages to people from the other side. And so I don't think it would be healthy, is where I'm going, for me to be wearing Celestite. I probably just would be too out there with the fairies. But I would imagine there are people that can wear it without an issue. So if that's you, please let me know. Or if you've had the experience that I actually am a little bit concerned about, being off with the fairies, let me know that too. Obviously, it's going to be a brilliant crystal to use to hold for meditation, especially if you're looking to raise your personal vibration and to be able to enhance your communication. One thing I might make a recommendation for with this crystal, just as an exercise or activity, if you're wanting to recollect your dreams or whatever, you could potentially meditate with that and then put it under your pillow, to help your dream recollection. Or if you're looking to astral or whatever, same thing, just sow your intention in the meditative state, and then when you go to sleep at night, just pop it under your pillow or beside your bed, whatever works for you, whatever's most comfortable. So, as always, I've given you a couple of examples of affirmations and how to do invocations in regard to the crystal and the metaphysical properties. And of course, it's up to you to get these into your own words, because the best person to create your affirmations is actually yourself. But there are some rules of thumbs. One is, you make it a statement, I am, and you finish with I am, because that reinforces the neural pathways. And we also don't want to do delusional ones. We keep them real, okay? I am open and receptive to divine communication and guidance. I am. Now you could change that to the communication from the highest vibrational beings, whatever sits comfortably with you. If you're looking to fast track your personal and spiritual development, you could turn around, as I've put here, I am grateful for my accelerated, divinely supported spiritual growth. And then you could put in, be a little bit more specific down the bottom. I now invoke my guardian angel, calling upon the Creator first. Okay, we always call upon the Creator before we call upon the angels. Under grace in the divine way for X, and I give thanks, for I know that as I ask, so I receive. Thanks be. These are just some examples. So I'll keep this brief because obviously this video is getting long, but if somebody were to pick Celestite out of my crystal lucky dip, I would be reminding them that they are to be reminded of the angelic realm, the higher realms, that they are supported, they are surrounded, they are loved divinely, and to connect in with this divine love and bring that love into their life as well. I would reminding them that their spirits, spirit guides and all the rest of it are accessible immediately. If they want to make contact, all they've got to do is invite and ask, and they will be there for them. And also, what else might say? That they're just being encouraged to develop themselves further. So when it comes to crystal care, I think the first and most important thing is that it is soft, okay, but it's not super soft. It does have some hardiness about it, shall I say. If we're talking about just an individual point, a geode or a big cluster is a whole different ballgame. They can be quite fragile. But so I guess because it's got colour to it, that would be the first thing. I wouldn't be putting it outside in the sunlight to be exposed. It's going to lose all of that beautiful blue about it. I certainly wouldn't immerse it in water because I would be concerned that it would actually, those clustered parts would basically crumble and disintegrate. I would put it under ambient light. By that I mean on my back patio table under the grapevines. I would put it out there to get sun exposure because it's not going to be too intense, and I wouldn't leave it out there all day long. You can, just to put it into perspective where the water is concerned, you can actually rinse it underwater if it's starting to become a dust gatherer, because this is what happens if we leave our crystals out on display and they're not in a display case. They can actually pick up dust and get a bit grotty looking. So you can run it underwater, but you would dry it very quickly. You wouldn't leave it to soak, okay? What else can I say? If it's in a setting, I wouldn't be using those ultrasonic cleaners or anything like that either. I'd be very careful with how I clean them. Once again, it's assess each situation on its own merits. If it's set in a gem setting, it's up to you whether or not you need to actually take that gem out and then get the silver or the gold cleaned behind it and then have it refitted by your jeweler. But most of the time, in my experience, because certainly the cut and polished and set in jewellery crystals, they can actually cope with being put into soapy water and a gentle toothbrush and cleaning them, rinsed off and dried off with a soft cloth. That's one of the things I use quite a lot. But when we're talking about energy and recharging, yes, you could put it out under moonlight. No, if it's a small point, I wouldn't be putting it outside for the dawn, for the birds to get off the table. What else? You could actually put it in an earth container to recharge. As always, I love selenite. I've got a bit of a story about selenite that's coming up. I've had an offer to buy it in bulk, and it's like, I can't use that much selenite, but I'm certainly tempted to buy it. But yes, I would use incense or sage or one of those other specific cleansing sages. I can't remember what they're called at the moment, the sticks that you will see. Oh gosh, they're all over the internet at the moment. They're fairly new for me because I never used anything like that, and in fact I've never bought them, but I can see the scents. Palo Santo, I think they're called, sticks. You could burn some of that off and do the clearing and cleansing with that. But as always, like I say, selenite's my go-to favourite. And when it comes to the clusters and that kind of thing, I have selenite in all different sizes. For example, beside me right now, because I've actually had a blue calcite arrive in the post, so I'm cleansing it and charging it while I record this video. Now, I have got a tiny sliver of selenite that is probably, looking at that, about 2 inches long and, I don't know, quarter of an inch thick. And I'm just resting that because it's very lightweight. You can imagine it doesn't do any damage to the points. It's so lightweight in itself. I can just pop that on top of whatever crystal that I'm trying to cleanse and recharge, and it'll just do its thing while I do whatever it is that I have to do. So this is one of the reasons why I love selenite as a crystal cleanser and recharger, and why you hear me talk about it all the time, is because it's so easy and it's not time consuming. But let me know if you've got any tips, because I'm all ears and eyes. I'm open to hearing. So, my friends, with that, that's about all I can share with you today, or all that I can think of to share with you. So, in the meantime, I'd like to say just the big old thank you for being part of my journey. Thank you for joining me today. If you're a returning visitor, thank you very much. If you're new, hope you stick around for a little while. Today, we've all been blessed, actually, because the little boy, my little Toby doggy, actually has been so quiet today as I look around for him. Actually, that Oh, good, he's sleeping. I just saw he's under the desk. He's sleeping, which is a good sign because he is a puppy. And if you saw some of my more recent posts, he actually chewed up my tarot deck. But anyway, he's nearly 1, so perhaps that's it. He's growing up, he's maturing, he's not so much a baby anymore. But anyway, until next time, I will say love you, leave you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Take care. Have a blessed day, blessed week. See you on the next one. Bye bye for now.